where it comes to security and defense. It's got a very masculine, what would you say, atmosphere. Well, at least people from the outside think that. But especially nowadays with technique evolving, there is a lot more to security and defense than an infantry soldier. And that is, of course, what you see in movies and on TV, men with large tattoos and arms like trees. And but it was mental strength, and women do have a lot of that. That's also required, and it's better to be smart than to be strong. So we have a lot to chip in. We are an augmentation to the natural male risk-taking.
Hello and welcome to the Anahita Speaker Series presented by Carnegie India, celebrating sterling stories of empowerment, struggle, and success from women professionals in different fields across the globe. Stories we hope are bound to inspire young professionals. I'm Nidhi Singh, Senior Research Analyst and Program Manager at the Technology and Society Program at Carnegie India. Today, we are delighted to have with us Rear Admiral Jeanette Morang. Ms. Morang is an advisor at the Directorate for Military Strategy and Special Representative of the Chief of Defense. In this position, her operational experience, both nationally and in NATO, can support strategic decision-making. She also plays a role in the Chief of Defense's engagement agenda. Ma'am, thank you so much for being here with us today. So I'll get right into the conversation. You joined the Royal Netherlands Navy at 18. In the first year that women were actually allowed to join as officers, and there were very few women entering the Navy at that time. What drew you to this life at sea? And what do you remember most vividly about the time that you joined and the early days of when women were joining the Navy?
Well, I had an uncle. He was in the merchant vessel Navy, and he told these wonderful sea stories about seeing strange places and teamwork on board ship. And that was really, I didn't really want to go to university. I would love to do something more practical with a clear idea of what it actually was you were going to do. And then he said, so, well, women might have difficulties in the merchant vessel Navy because when you're a young officer on board, you're responsible for cargo. And there are countries that simply don't take orders from women. But did you ever think about a Navy, he said, because he did a conscription time there. And he said, I had a wonderful time. It's teamwork, and it's also at sea. You also be going places. And so my father, who had been a conscript in the Navy, he had to go to sea. He was teaching English, but he took me to the Navy days in Den Helder, which is our naval port. And I was impressed. I thought it was incredible. The ships, the people, the stories. And then I wanted to apply for Naval Academy, but they told me, so, well, actually, the academy is not open for women. And then later I got a call, so, well, we'll start next year when you graduate. We will start also with a project with enter women also at the academy. And at that point, I thought, oh, that's great. Well planned. Because I really wanted to go. I was really keen on going. And then you think that the organization is as prepared as you are. But when we got there, so it was 102 male colleagues and 8 women. And the first days you start doing your introduction and you get your gear, your uniform. And we also had a list of things that we needed to have. And there was stuff on it like a corselet, which was something that was not worn in the Netherlands anymore since the 50s. My grandmother had them, so I knew what they were, but And we said, well, we're looking at the packing list. I said, well, if this is how prepared they are, we might run into some additional old-fashioned views about women. And yeah, that was about wearing a skirt or wearing trousers, or so they just had to find a way how to work with us, and then sometimes they decide, so well, have to be treated the same as the men, and then they sometimes forgot that but they're not the same. So sometimes it's better to communicate to women in a different way, but that is something that they definitely had to invent along the road.
No, but that's a good timing for you, I'd say.
Absolutely.
But so going on in your career, you became the first woman to command a frigate, and later the first female flag officer of the Dutch Navy. When you stepped into those roles, did you feel this pressure of being the first and everything that entails? Did you try to consciously block that out? What helped to keep you grounded?
So what helped to keep me grounded were people that believed in me. Because at a certain point when I got my first command, which was actually a mine hunter 10 years prior to the frigate, I really thought, oh my God, I was 32 at the time. I can't do this. He's far better equipped for the command than I am. And then the one who had appointed me, said, well, do you really think that we would give you command of a ship, a Navy ship, when we didn't think you could do it? I said, well, yeah, you've got a point there. Of course, it wouldn't make sense because the organization would never risk, the ship's one thing, but personnel is another. So that then when you know people believe in you, that's very important. And that also makes it easier to accept that there are people that do not believe in you. But what made it difficult at that point in time is when I suffered a little incident with the ship. Then suddenly people generally said, so, okay, you see, women can't do it. And then, fortunately, I got a lot of backup from the commander of the MCM force, but that made you aware of the fact that you were not being judged for being you, but you were just being judged for being a woman. So that anything I did wrong would reflect on female chances to do the same wonderful job as I did. So that, I wouldn't say made me risk averse, but that made me definitely conscious, and I balanced risk more. So I wouldn't take risk just to show off like my male colleagues, but I would always make it a very balanced procedure.
So just sort of going forward on that, because you've commanded personnel before. So you've led crews at sea, and then you've commanded ships. You've also guided multinational teams. So in these environments, which require a lot of calm under pressure and discipline and clarity, how would you describe your leadership style? When there is, of course, a lot of pressure of if you make a mistake, then everybody gets judged for it. And how has your leadership style evolved over the years?
In the beginning, it's difficult when everyone looks at you waiting for orders. But that is the good thing about the Navy. They don't just throw you off on the deep end. You take it gradually because, I'm an operations officer. So you start your career as a navigator on the bridge. You take the ship safely from A to B. You've got a small team that you have to lead. And then when you get these other jobs that are more demanding and more personnel, you grow into the position. So that really, really helps. But I would describe myself not as someone who says, come on, follow me. And it's more to use the talent of your team. When there is time, give them the guidance they need, but also the freedom they can handle. Because in the end, people who are professionals have a very good understanding of what it is, how to do their job. So if you can keep them between the guardrails, but still have to do things their own way, then the product is 9 times 10, the product is better and the people are very happy with the result. And that's a much easier way of leading than forcing your own opinion and your own ideas upon someone else who potentially doesn't really understand where you want to go. And I found that it is a really, really good way of getting the best from your team, but also to build trust, because trust goes both ways. You expect them to trust you as a leader, but you can't expect them to trust you when it's not also the other way around.
No, I think it's really nice to hear about how your journey's progressed. But the other part of it that I want to hear about is how like the attitudes in the Navy have progressed. So when you look back at the culture of the Navy in the 1980s, when you first went there and then they first started accepting women into the Naval Academy, and then you compare it to today, what changes stand out to you the most in terms of like how they're looking at women officers? And what changes do you think still need to be made to make women feel more at home in leadership roles?
Well, we see, first of all, there were many more women. So when I joined my first ship, we had a crew of 175 and there were 25 women. So this is a very small percentage. But now when I took command of Standing NATO Maritime Group 1, I joined my flagship, and when I came up on the bridge, they were all women. There were no men. So that definitely has changed to some aspect. Difficulty, however, is that women, there are a lot joining, but there are also a lot leaving when they get a family with children. So retention is difficult, and that is something that we really have to work on. And I also feel myself being responsible to show to others that you can actually have a family, but also have a career at sea. So that is something that we still have to advocate, and we still have to make people aware, and we even have to make ourselves aware that our mind, it works slightly different. And of course, I know that there are women that don't go by that specific rule, but where men always think they can do everything, women have the tendency to think there is someone that can do a better job than they. Or when there is something that you need to do, they first want to make an inventory of the risks, see what they can mitigate and how they can do that. Well, men just go and try to manage the risk along the way. And men and women, in that sense, they're a great team, because then you have a 360-degree coverage. But if you want to have women in leadership roles, there is a different way of encouraging them to get there. And well, that is about the mental part, but also the physical part. For us, if you have uniforms where they say they're unisex, so for both men and women, it actually means they're male. So we had a lieutenant general. She was she's now actually since a few weeks Minister of Housing. So but she did a lot to also at the top make sure that there was attention for the possibility to let women be women. So if you, well, of course, not at sea, because then your gear just needs to be practical. But if you have a shore job, that you can also wear a nice uniform dress instead of something baggy that is male, but then slightly adjusted to make it female. So that's an important thing as well. And what we could still do is the coaching, because I do believe it helps.
I think you've touched on this point already, but I want to look at it a little bit more, is like the personal cost to women when they're sort of in these roles. So just there's the uniform, but behind the uniform, people are still mothers and colleagues and mentors. So how do you navigate like the balance between being a like the demanding naval career and what your personal life is? And what are the kind of inner strengths that help you navigate this balance?
So well, sometimes when you're at sea, you're working. But nowadays it's already much easier to keep in contact with home, because when I first started going to sea, the only way to have contact was, there was a 10-minute phone call, when you, pulled into port, because mobile phone didn't exist, and you wrote letters. And now you can send emails, you can basically call home every day if you want to, you do VTC. So, connection with home is much more there. So you can also still remain engaged with what's happening at home. And it's also important that you really like your job. And I believe that's for most things.
Yeah.
If you like your job, then it's easier to spend a lot of energy in it. But you have to be conscious that for the people at home, it's important that you also be there for them. So it's a conscious division of where to put your attention.
No, and I really like the theme of like camaraderie and then liking what you do and how much that sort of plays into how you grow in these roles. So as we mark International Women's Day, what message would you want to share with young women who may hesitate to pursue careers in fields like defense and security or maritime leadership, as yourself, because they don't really see themselves represented there?
So first of all, I would like to say you can do anything you want. If you are eager and you have a passion, just pursue it, because that's really, really important. And second of all, there will always people to support you. So don't hesitate to ask for help. You don't have to do it all on your own. There is always people that will help you get better, learn more. So that is really important. And where it comes to security and defense, it's got a very masculine would you say atmosphere? Well, at least people from the outside think that. But especially nowadays with technique evolving, there is a lot more to security and defense than an infantry soldier. And that is, of course, what you see in movies and on TV, men with large tattoos and arms like trees. And but it was mental strength, and women do have a lot of that. That's also required. And it's better to be smart than to be strong. So we have a lot to chip in. We are an augmentation to the natural male risk-taking. And, well, as I said, physical strength. Well, when you're an infantry officer, it's really important. But, for instance, in my job, I mean, the largest ship we have is 169 meters long. So there isn't much running or doing physical things. Of course, we've got a gym to stay fit. It's a fit body and fit mind. But physical strength, they should definitely not worry about it. And, for instance, there is so many tasks, and, the team that I'm, here in India with, they're also female, they're civilians, but they're also, doing a lot for the security and defense sector, because they're really, really smart, and they know a lot about the background of all kinds of conflicts, but also of other countries. So that is also something that you could do. You could be in international relations. You could be in a communication. So if you don't want to be, you could be a political advisor. You could be a legal advisor. You could be a doctor. So there are so many aspects, and then you could still support, well, what we call the tip of the spear in the combat positions. And even if you decide later on that that is where your passion lies and that you want to move forward, that is also something that you do potentially. But it's very fulfilling to play a role in security and defense, because everyone profits, and the defense, the values that we believe in, like freedom of choice and democracy. So
That's very important, especially in the current situation that we're in. So as we come to an end of today's conversation, thank you so much, ma'am, for taking the time to be here and to talk to us and to have a conversation with all our viewers about how you can move forward with a career in military leadership and the values that go behind it. So to our audience, we hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did. Do visit Carnegie India's YouTube channel to access all episodes of the Anahita Speaker Series. Thank you and see you next month.